So round two is we're going to compare the nuances of employment relationships and how that's defined between the laws in China and the UK. So James, can you give me an overview of the employment contract, the relationship, how it's defined?
Yes, so actually there are two possible relationships, legal relationships in this employment. One is a contractual relationship, and another one is an employment relationship. That's very different, because if you are set up a employment relationship with the employer, so this employee maybe they can buy social insurance and enjoy some holiday, enjoy some leave benefit, but you are just the contractual relationship. You cannot enjoy the social insurance. So that's very different. So actually, in China, according to the Ministry of the Labor and the Social Security, Securities notice on establishing employment relationship. So maybe the arbitrators will consider this criteria to determine the employment. The first one is the both parties meet the legal qualification. So in China, the natural personnel cannot be the employer, must be your enterprises, company or non-profit organizations. They cannot be the natural personnel. And the second one, the employee is subject to employer's labor rules and management, performing paid work assigned by the employer. That means the employer can control the employees' control their behavior, and we can manage them. So I think that is a manage and be managed relationship. So the second condition is the employee's work is part of the employer's core business. So if you are meet these characteristics, so that's the labor relationship. But if you just if you hire a nanny or a driver, etc., the personal. For example, because I hire a nanny or a driver personally, we just the contractual relationship. We cannot buy the social insurance to these employees, and so that's a risk. So because if my driver was hurt during the work, so I must pay the money to the driver. So because we cannot buy the social insurance. So if he suffered the work injury, so the government cannot afford these things. So sometimes I will buy some commercial insurance to this people.
Oh, I
so
see.
I think that's a difference.
That's interesting. So if you have a contractor relationship, and then they get injured, I guess it has to be an injury related to work. Then you as an individual, you'd have to pay for their sort of medical expenses.
No, it's not a must. But if you want to prevent the risk of the work injury, because you cannot buy the work injury insurance for them.
No.
So if you want to prevent the risk, maybe you want to buy the commercial insurance for the medical or some insurance to protect them.
Which we've talked about on other episodes. Actually, is sometimes like an employment relationship can actually protect the employer as well as the employee.
Yes.
Particularly in those kind of scenarios.
Yeah.
Okay, and how about in the UK then? I mean, defining an employment relationship.
Yes, it's a little bit more complicated, I think, in a way, because in the UK there are, at the moment, although the current Labour government is planning to change this, but there are three status. So there's employee status, which has the highest protection in terms of employee rights. Worker status, which is like the middle protection, but doesn't have the same protection as employees. And then self-employed contractors. So whereas you described employee and contractors, we've got this middle one as well to sort of just add a little bit to the equation. I think in terms of defining an employee, that's not written in statute. So it does come down to the control, like you were saying, the employer has control over the employee. Mutuality of obligation, which is a sort of legal term that basically means the employer will pay them and they will do the work in return for being paid. So that's the mutuality of obligation. And they're providing the service personally. So they can't send their brother or their aunt or somebody to do the job because they don't fancy going to work on that day. Whereas a self-employed person, on the whole, would be able to send a substitute to do the work if that's what they chose to do. The test, there's two tests as well for employment and for the purposes of paying tax. There's a slightly different test to the purposes of claiming employment rights. So that also adds a little bit of a complication for the employer to work out. But as I say, the government's looking to simplify it because with the growth of the gig economy, it's sort of merged all these lines and made it quite unpredictable as to what kind of category somebody's going to fall into. But in the UK, as an individual, you can employ people. But of course, that means the risk being that you're personally liable, like you explained. Okay. So again, you would look for insurance to cover those personal liabilities. But also employers have to have employer liability insurance to cover things like accidents. So that's not automatically covered. So, but it's a legal obligation for the employer to have that insurance.
Just want to pick up on that. So, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, James. I mean, so you mentioned that, it's a legal obligation to have employer liability insurance. I guess if an individual is employing someone, then would they need to have it? Or
I think there's a minimum. Thanks, Ben, for putting me on the spot. I think there's a minimum number of employees. So you would take out public liability insurance to cover.
And so and in China, I mean, so in the UK, it's mandatory to have this employer liability insurance, but in China, it's not mandatory to have employer liability insurance. Is that right?
It's mandatory. It's a mandatory social insurance.
It's mandatory to have social insurance.
Yes, you must. The company must buy the social insurance for the employees. So that's a mandatory.
But it's not mandatory to have sort of commercial employer.
Yes, it's just a supplementary things. So it's not mandatory for commercial insurance. But in China, the social insurance actually was born by both parties. So, for example, the pension. The pension may be the proportion the company is 12% based on their salary, and the employees will be afford 8% of the base salary. So actually, it's not just the one party to buy the mandatory social insurance. It's both parties must pay. Yes. So every month maybe we need to from the salary we need to buy the personal pensions first. So the rest of the salary so we can give the employees. So
because the social insurance is much more than just liability, to protect against injury.
That's a very high.
Actually,
I calculate almost 35% about the social insurance.
Yeah.
Yes, they're very high. Okay.
So in the UK, there's national insurance contributions which go towards state benefits and state pension.
Okay.
And for the employer, that's just gone up, and then there's been a big fuss in the UK about it to 15%.
50%. Okay.
And the employee pays, I think, about 8%.
8%.
It's on a bit of a sliding scale, depending
Okay.
on what they
Oh.
on what they earn. But that. And then pensions is separate, and a lot of companies have private pensions, and they, providing the combination of the two contributions is 8%, then they can, some offer more, some companies offer a higher contribution than that, but nothing as high, it doesn't go, well, unless some of the pensions, like the teachers' pensions, are quite high contributions, but not as, most of them aren't as high as 30%.
It's a different profession, actually different pension.
Well, there is a standard state pension,
Okay.
which is obligatory. Well, employees can opt out of it, but it's standard it has to be offered. But then there can also be contractual arrangements which are more generous if that's what the employer chooses to do. But none of this covers accidents at work. So that's why you have the employer liability insurance.
Yeah,
for
Right, yeah, whereas
accidents.
social insurance has an injury
Yeah.
insurance element into it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also, social insurance has a cap as well.
Has
And
a cap. Yes.
Yeah,
yes,
in each city
it's
it's-
3
yeah.
times of the salary.
it's pretty
Has a cap. Yeah.
Yeah, so for example, if the salary is higher than the cap, then it's just 30% of the upper limit of that cap. So
Okay.
whereas I know in the UK, is it cap?
It's capped,
It's
yeah.
capped as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
So also just about written contracts. I mean, is it required to have a written contract for an employment law in both China and the UK?
So in China, so the employer must sign a written contract with the employees. So that's a mandatory models. So if you fail to sign a written contract, so maybe you must pay the twice salary every month. Yes.
Wow.
To the employer. So that's very different, right?
Yeah. Well, in the UK, it's also mandatory to issue a contract, and also it says in the law what needs to be in the contract. There can be more. The contract can have more contractual arrangements in it, but there are certain statutory things that have to be in it.
Yeah.
But there isn't a big penalty if you don't do it.
Yeah.
Not like that. No.
Yeah, and
So I think the Chinese this clause may be arguable during during the long term, because the company think it's too strict to the company.
Yeah.
So, but this clause not modified as far as also.
But it is important, really,
Yeah.
for both parties to have what they've agreed written on a piece of paper, isn't it? So they both know where they stand. And I think the problem is that people are busy; they just don't get round to issuing the contracts, and sometimes the terms and conditions change, but they don't get updated in the contract.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great. So to summarize, really, I mean, there are a lot of similarities in this way in terms of how to define the labour relationship between a contractor and an employee. A bit more bespoke sort of layers in the UK law, England, Wales law about worker status. But a lot of similar things. For example, a contractor can substitute. They have their own autonomy, multi-client work, etc. And also, contractors are more responsible for paying their own social insurance and etc. Great. So that is the difference between contracts and employment relationship.